Do we have a common human nature? This was the main question in the debate between Noam Chomsky and Michel Foucault. This debate wasn't just about sharing different ideas. It was about revealing two radically different visions of the world. Frans Elders, a Dutch professor of philosophy and the moderator of the debate, introduced them as mountain diggers working at opposite sides of the same mountain with different tools, without even knowing if they're working in each other's direction. The debate was organized by a Dutch TV channel in 1971, and it opposed two intellectual giants of the 20th century. While the main focus was on human nature, it also highlighted their contrasting political views. Noam Chomsky is a well-known linguist, famous for his generative grammar theory. He is also a political activist who is still active to this day. Michel Foucault was a philosopher, social theorist, and historian of ideas. If you want to explore Foucault's major works, Madness and Civilization or Discipline and Punish, you can check out my earlier videos linked in the description. So in this debate, Chomsky defended the idea of innate knowledge and universal truth, while Foucault challenged the idea and questioned whether such truth could truly exist. So let's get into it and start exploring their ideas. My name is Mustafa and I'm the creator of Beyond Theory. My channel is dedicated to understanding the world by making complex philosophical ideas simple and practical. If you like my work, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. It helps me to continue this work. Thank you for your support. In the Chomsky-Foucault debate, the idea of human nature is based on the belief that certain universal traits exist in all human beings, regardless of when or where they lived. So it's something common to all humans. And from Noam Chomsky's perspective, as we said, he developed his generative grammar theory, which argues that by learning a simple set of rules and principles, we can generate or produce an infinite number of complex and meaningful sentences, like the ones we use when we learn to speak. So for him, we learn a simple set of rules and we generate an infinite number of sentences. And this process is innate, meaning that we're born with it. It's a universal and fixed aspect of humanity across cultures and time, so it can be linked to a common human nature. Chomsky described this system as a universal cognitive model that structures the brain and its development from birth. This theory directly opposes behaviorist linguistics or behaviorism, which argues that learning and language are acquired purely through experience, so via repetition, trial and error, and specific stimuli depending on the context. And for Chomsky, this is obviously false, because as we said, he believes that humans have this genetic predisposition or biological foundation for language, not just learned habits. On the other hand, for Foucault, we have a completely different perspective. At that time, Foucault had already published two of his major works, Madness and Civilization and The Order of Things. And in the latter, he develops his idea of episteme, which means that each historical period has its own way of understanding knowledge and defining what is considered scientific or valid. So it's a framework of knowledge that shapes how people view and understand the world in a particular time and place. And the word comes from the Greek word for knowledge. And Foucault argues that each historical period has its own episteme or way of thinking. And this way of thinking dictates everything. The questions we can ask, the research we can do, and what even is considered real knowledge at that time. In this perspective, knowledge isn't universal or objective, but deeply rooted in the dominant culture, economic, and scientific discourse. These ideas are shaped by the systems of power that control and create knowledge in that period. Now that we've explained the main differences between Chomsky's and Foucault's ideas, let's focus on the debate itself. Frans Elders starts the discussion with this question. Are we the product of external factors, or if in spite of our differences, we have something we could call a common human nature, by which we can call each other human beings? Chomsky answers by explaining his generative grammar theory, and he says that a small number of input can produce an infinite number of output. So by learning a simple set of rules and principles, we're able to form infinite number of meaningful and complex sentences. And for Chomsky, we're all pre-programmed in some sense. We all have this built-in framework inside of us that allow us to process, understand, and learn languages and thought. And for him, it's hard to believe that we're the product of our environments, because if you analyze or take a look at our surroundings, they're not at all designed in a way to make us so skilled at mastering a language or gaining and understanding complex thought. And Chomsky gives the example of someone or the people in general that never went to school or never got a formal education, yet they still manage to speak properly and understand complex thought. So it doesn't make sense that we learn language or we learn thinking from the environment. We learn it because we have this natural ability to learn it and to be able to think. He says, I would claim then that this instinctive knowledge, if you like, this schematism that makes it possible to derive complex and intricate knowledge on the basis of very partial data, is one fundamental constituent of human nature. For Foucault, human nature isn't a fixed idea. It only appears as a way of thinking during a specific time in history. He calls it an epistemological indicator, meaning it's not a scientific fact in itself, but a way of understanding science at that moment. If Chomsky developed the concept of human nature through his theory of generative grammar, it doesn't mean that the idea already existed waiting to be discovered. It means that the question was asked and the idea was shaped by the cultural and intellectual environment Chomsky lived in. A world where the concept of human nature seemed meaningful and relevant. Since science evolves, what scientists believe is true today might not be true tomorrow. A new discovery could replace a current truth, making it obsolete. People who ask different questions use new research methods and find new answers. And that's why Foucault sees the concept of human nature as a product of history, shaped by the state of science and its rules at a specific time. For example, earlier approaches to linguistics focus on social and collective aspects of language, without considering human nature. Language was seen as a social tool for communication and as a shared system within a group. These earlier views treated language as a product of social and cultural processes rather than something stemming from universal, innate features of the mind. However, Chomsky believes that humans are biologically equipped with a set of intellectual structures, or ways of thinking, which make certain types of science possible. These innate mental structures act as a framework for how we understand the world. In this case, the ability to make scientific discoveries relies on these structures that narrow down the range of possibilities. He compares a child's natural ability to learn a language with a scientist's ability to create and discover theories. Both processes are quite complex, and they're only made possible because the human mind has built-in limitations that guide and shape how we move from data to knowledge. Foucault agrees that creativity depends on a system of rules and limitations, but he disagrees with Chomsky's view that these rules are tied to the human mind or an innate human nature. He believes that these rules that enable creativity and scientific progress are found outside of the mind, for example, in social structures, relations of production, or class struggles. For Foucault, the conditions that shape knowledge and creativity are not fixed or biological. They emerge from historical, social, and economic contexts. In essence, he is shifting the focus from the mind as the source of constraints to societal factors. This reflects Foucault's broader philosophy that knowledge and ideas are shaped by power dynamics, social organization, and historical conditions. Chomsky focuses on what is universal in the human mind, while Foucault looks at how social and economic conditions shape knowledge. The rest of the discussion focuses on their political views and the best way to organize society. However, creativity and human nature remain at the center of the discussion, because for Chomsky, creativity plays a vital role in human nature, and thus a free society should protect this creative freedom at all costs and for everyone. So this includes the ability to invent, explore, express, and think freely without constraints. His views are influenced by anarchism, and he believes that political and economic systems should be decentralized and managed by workers' councils and free associations. So we can say that he supports a form of anarcho-syndicalist federalism. It's the appropriate form of social organization for an advanced technological society in which human beings do not have to be forced into the position of tools or cogs in the machine. When people are free from oppressive systems, they can fully express their creativity. And that's why for Chomsky, decentralized systems would give them the freedom to innovate and develop their full potential, enabling the creative urge inherent in human nature to flourish. And in this society, people will focus more on artistic pursuits, learning, education, science, and helping their community, without any constraints from the system. On the other hand, Foucault claims that he doesn't have an ideal model for our scientific and technological society, unlike Chomsky. However, he stresses the importance of a different task. It seems to me that the real political task in our contemporary society is to criticize the workings of institutions, particularly the ones that appear to be neutral and independent, and to attack them in such a way that the political violence, which has always exercised itself obscurely through them, will finally be unmasked so that one can fight against them. As you may know, Foucault has a specific and different conception of power and how it operates in our modern society. He says that power can't be localized in one institution like the state, because it's diffuse. So for him, power exists in benevolent and neutral institutions like the family, schools, the army, hospitals, and psychiatry. And these institutions appear to be benevolent and neutral from the outside, but in reality they help maintain the existing power structures, power relations, and reinforce social hierarchies. And he warns that if we adopt a certain conception of human nature, and if we don't properly uncover, challenge, and criticize these institutions, we risk repeating the same power relations in our post-revolutionary society, even within movements that seek justice like anarcho-syndicalism, which is proposed by Chomsky. Simply put, Foucault refuses to use or adopt any ideas or definitions from the system he's fighting against. And he gives the example of the early 20th century Marxism that adopted bourgeois ideas on happiness, the family, aesthetics, and sexuality. Chomsky agrees with Foucault's observation, and he adds that the main institutions that should be challenged are economic ones, so multinational corporations and financial institutions, because they also appear from the outside to be democratic and neutral, but in reality they are autocratic and a source of oppression. They are controlled by a minority of shareholders, while the majority of the workers have no control or power on how the company operates. For Chomsky, there are two important intellectual tasks. One is to try to create the vision of a future just society, and another task is to understand very clearly the nature of power, oppression, terror, and destruction in our own society. He emphasizes the need to connect a concept of human nature that values freedom, dignity, and creativity with a social structure that allows these qualities to flourish. He argues that even if we can't define every aspect of a future society, we should have a clear vision of the direction we want to take. This can guide us in making meaningful social change or revolution. Our concept of human nature is certainly limited, partial, socially conditioned, constrained by our own character defects, and the limitations of the intellectual culture in which we exist. Yet at the same time, it's of critical importance that we have some direction, that we know what impossible goals we're trying to achieve if we hope to achieve some of the possible goals. Chomsky believes it's important to realize and fulfill human nature in a just society, while Foucault dismisses this idea and focuses on politics as a matter of power struggles and interests. Foucault says, instead of thinking about social struggles in terms of justice, we should focus on them as power struggles. So what does that mean? It means that when the working class fights against the bourgeoisie, it's not because the fight against capitalism is inherently just. It's because the working class wants to take power for itself. So instead of borrowing definitions from the systems we aim to dismantle, we should focus on understanding power dynamics and how they shape our ideas, including the concept of human nature. The Chomsky-Foucault debate is an example of two very different ways of thinking about justice, power, and human nature. On one side, we have Chomsky, who believes in a universal human nature rooted in creativity, freedom, and dignity. For him, the ultimate goal is to build a just society that lets these qualities flourish, and free people from oppressive systems like the state and capitalism. His vision is clear and optimistic. It's rooted in the idea that we can and should fight for a better world based on clear moral principles and ideals. This is classical anarchism, based on a clear idea of what is right. This view is like a more radical version of classical liberalism, opposing all forms of authority. On the other side, we have Foucault, who sees human nature as something shaped by history and power structures. He's skeptical of ideas like justice, arguing that they're often tools used by the existing power system to maintain control. For Foucault, the focus is mainly on power struggles. He has a more cautious approach and urges us to question everything, even the ideals we think are liberating. This is a post-anarchist approach, influenced by postmodern or post-structuralist ideas. This perspective is skeptical of modern ideas and their promises of freedom. I personally really enjoyed this debate, And even though I usually agree with Foucault's ideas on power, I found his arguments and his position too relativistic and not very practical, contrary to Chomsky, who had a clear model for action, like when he gave the example of civil disobedience during the Vietnam War. Foucault, inspired by Nietzsche, is too focused on tearing down ideas, while Chomsky had a different, more concrete and practical project, which is to try and imagine and build a better future. Not necessarily an ideal one, but just a better one. And I think that in this context, it made Chomsky's view more appealing to me. So what do you think? Is there a universal human nature we should fight to free? Or is it all about power relations and the dominant narrative? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.